They tied my hands and legs with thick ropes. My uncle's son kicked me hard in the stomach while my uncle stood there, watching. Then they both dragged me into a dark room inside their house and locked the door behind them. For 12 days I didn't see the sun. They beat me, yelled at me, and treated me like I wasn't even human. I begged them to let me go. I cried. I even promised not to tell anyone. But they didn't care. They just laughed. They starved me and only gave me water like I was some animal. I thought I was going to die there. I really did. But something changed deep inside me. Something strong woke up. I stopped crying. I stopped begging. And that's when I started planning. Let me take you back to the beginning of how I even ended up in that nightmare. It all started one school holiday when my mother had to travel to take care of my grandma, who was very sick. My dad was already late, and there was no one else to watch me. I was just 11 at the time. My mom begged my uncle, her older brother, to take me in for just 2 weeks. Uncle Daniel agreed without even blinking. He told my mom that I would be safe with him and his son Jerry. Jerry was just 16 then. He used to smile a lot and act like he cared about me. That was before everything changed. At first, the house felt fine. Uncle Daniel lived in a small bungalow in the quiet part of town. I had my own room, and Jerry even helped me with my homework. But just 3 days after I got there, things started to feel strange. Uncle Daniel began locking the front gate at odd hours and always kept the keys in his pocket. Jerry started looking at me weird, like I was a toy he could play with. And one night, I heard them arguing in whispers outside my room. On the 4th night, Uncle Daniel told me not to go to school the next day. He said I was going to help him clean the house. That was strange, but I didn't ask questions. I was scared of making him angry. That morning, Jerry came into my room without knocking. He had this evil grin on his face. Before I could scream, Uncle Daniel rushed in behind him and slammed the door. Jerry pushed me onto the floor. That was the first day they tied me up. The beginning of my 12 days in that prison. They told the neighbors I had gone on holiday to another relative's house. Nobody suspected a thing. My screams were swallowed by thick walls. They beat me when I cried too much. They beat me when I said nothing at all. They made me clean, cook, and serve them like a maid, all while I was tied like an animal. But I didn't give up. I remembered my mother's voice. She always told me, "You are stronger than anything that tries to break you." Her words echoed in my head every time they slapped me. I started watching their every move, even in pain. I counted the keys on Uncle Daniel's belt. I listened to when they left the room. I noticed when they forgot to tie my left hand properly. My body was weak, but my mind was becoming sharp. They didn't know it, but I was no longer their little victim. By the 9th day, I could tell the time by the sun rays slipping through a crack in the wall. I knew Jerry always slept after eating around 2 p.m., and Uncle Daniel would go outside to drink palm wine with his friend Mr. Cola around 3 p.m. That gave me a small window. Very small, but just enough. So on the 12th morning, when Jerry came to untie me and drag me to the kitchen, I saw my chance. He was holding his phone in one hand and trying to loosen the rope with the other. That's when I kicked him. I kicked him as hard as I could between his legs. He screamed. I didn't wait. I grabbed the broken stool leg nearby and I swung it with all my strength and hit Jerry across the face. He fell back, shouting in pain, blood spilling from his nose. I didn't stop to watch. I ran. My feet were weak, my knees shaking from hunger and days of beatings, but I ran like my life depended on it. Because it did. I dashed toward the front door, only to find it locked, as always. Uncle Daniel had taken the keys with him. I panicked. I looked around the room, then at the small kitchen window near the sink. It was narrow, too narrow for an adult, but maybe I could squeeze through. I limped over, climbed the stool, and pushed the window open. The wood cracked as I forced it wider, scraping my skin. But I didn't care. I pulled myself up, twisted my body through the frame, and fell on the cement ground outside with a thud. That was the first breath of fresh air I'd taken in 12 days. But I wasn't safe yet. "Hey!" Jerry screamed from inside the house. I looked back and saw him stumbling toward the window, blood still pouring from his face. I scrambled up and ran down the street. I didn't know where I was going. I just wanted to get far away. People turned their heads to look at me. My clothes were torn. My face was swollen. My legs were bleeding. But nobody stopped me. Until I collapsed in front of a fruit seller's stand. She screamed, "Jesus! This child! Somebody help me!" The crowd gathered fast. A man rushed to lift me up, asking who I was, what happened. But I couldn't speak. I passed out right there in his arms. When I woke up, I was in a small clinic. A nurse was wiping my face. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You're safe." I burst into tears. The police came. They asked questions. I told them everything. Every dark and ugly detail. I thought things would get better after that, but I was wrong. The officers said they would go arrest Uncle Daniel and Jerry, but when they got to the house, it was empty. They had run away. Vanished. Left everything behind. That's when the shame began. At first, people from the neighborhood came to the clinic with food and gifts. They called me a brave girl. They said I was strong. But after a few days, the whispers started. Why didn't she run sooner? What if she's lying? How can an 11-year-old girl escape two grown men? Even the nurses started treating me differently. One woman even asked if I had been sneaking around with Jerry before the incident. Can you imagine that? I was the victim, but they made me feel like I had done something wrong. When my mom finally came back from the village, she broke down crying. She held me in her arms and swore she would never leave me again. But the damage had already been done. I couldn't sleep at night. Every noise reminded me of the beatings. Every shadow made my heart race. I stopped eating. I stopped talking. I just sat in silence most days, staring at the wall. That's when the counselor came. Her name was Miss April. She wore bright clothes and always smiled. But her eyes were sad, like she knew pain too. She didn't ask me to talk at first. She just came every afternoon, sat beside me, and drew pictures or told stories. Sometimes she played music. Sometimes she just hummed. Slowly I started listening. Then one day I asked her, "Why are you so nice to me?" She looked me in the eyes and said, "Because I was once where you are now." That broke something in me. I cried that whole day. Then I began to speak. I told her everything. Again and again. I emptied my pain. And with each word I felt lighter. Not healed but not drowning anymore. One day Miss April gave me a small notebook. "Write everything you feel," she said. "Even the things you're scared to say." I did. I wrote about the ropes, the beatings, the hunger, the nightmares. I wrote about the smell of Jerry's breath and the way Uncle Daniel's eyes turned cold when he hit me. I wrote about the anger, the fear, the shame. And then something happened. My writing turned into strength. One afternoon, as I walked past the school gates for the first time in weeks, a group of girls whispered and laughed. I knew what they were saying, but I didn't cry. I just walked past them and went into class. Because deep inside me, I knew they didn't survive what I survived. But just when I thought I was moving on, something terrifying happened again. Uncle Daniel came back. He showed up at our front gate one evening, his eyes wild and desperate. My mother screamed and rushed to block the door. I stood behind her, frozen in shock. He started banging the gate and shouting, "I didn't do anything. Let me talk to her. She's lying. That girl is lying." My neighbors gathered again. But this time something inside me snapped, not in fear, but in fire. I stepped forward. And I said something that made everyone freeze. Something that made Uncle Daniel stop banging the gate. I stepped forward, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. My knees were shaking, but I didn't stop. My voice came out low but steady. I said, "If you're not afraid of the truth, come in and face me like a man. I'll tell the whole world what you did." The crowd gasped. Uncle Daniel froze, his hand still gripping the gate. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then his face changed. That fake charm he always wore disappeared. His eyes went cold just like they had on the first day he tied me up. But I didn't move. I didn't hide behind my mother. I stood there looking him dead in the eyes. He turned and ran. Just like that. He turned around and ran down the street like a thief. Two men from the crowd chased after him. My mother pulled me into the house and locked the door, hugging me tight as her hands trembled. "You shouldn't have spoken to him," she whispered. "He could have hurt you again." But I wasn't scared anymore. I was tired of being scared. The police came not long after. They said Uncle Daniel had been spotted in town a few days earlier but disappeared again. That evening I sat with Miss April and asked her, "Will I always be afraid of seeing him?" She said, "Being afraid doesn't make you weak. What matters is what you do in spite of that fear." Those words stayed with me. Weeks passed. School reopened fully. I started going regularly again. Some kids still whispered, but I stopped caring. One day I stood in front of the class and read a story I wrote. It was about a girl who fought monsters and found her voice. The teacher cried. Some students clapped. That was the first time I saw myself as more than what had happened to me. Then came the day everything changed again. I was walking home from school when a white car slowly pulled up beside me. I paused. The window rolled down and there he was, Jerry, sitting in the back seat. His face was clean. His clothes were sharp. But his eyes, they were still evil. He smiled. "Hey, little cousin," he said. "Get in. Let's talk." I dropped my backpack and ran. He didn't chase me. The car didn't move. It just sat there as I disappeared into the streets. When I got home, I couldn't breathe. I collapsed on the floor. My mother screamed and poured water on me. I managed to tell her what happened. She called the police again. But by the time they got to that part of the road, the car was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the windows. Every sound made me jump. My mother locked every door and sat up all night with a stick beside her bed. The next day, Miss April said it was time for us to go to court. "They may be gone now," she said. "But if we don't take legal steps, they'll come back. And next time, they might not wait." So we went to the family court. I was nervous. My hands were sweating as I sat in that wooden box in the courtroom. The judge looked serious. The lawyers looked even scarier. But when I started telling my story, how they tied me, how they beat me, how I escaped, I felt powerful again. People listened. Some cried. The judge didn't say much that day. He said they needed more investigation. But he gave an order. If Uncle Daniel or Jerry were spotted anywhere, they should be arrested immediately. That was a small win. But the real war wasn't over. That night, something strange happened. Around 2 a.m., our neighbor banged on our door. He said he heard footsteps on our roof. We rushed out, my mother, me, and 2 neighbors. They climbed up the side wall with a ladder and checked the rooftop. What they found sent chills down my spine. A note. It was pinned to the roofing sheet with a knife. It read, "You think you've won. But this isn't over. We're watching you." My mother screamed. I fell to the ground crying. Not out of fear, but out of frustration. Why wouldn't they leave us alone? Why did evil always seem to find a way back? The police came again. They took the note and the knife. They put extra patrols on our street. They promised us protection. But how do you protect a child from nightmares that wear real faces? The next morning, I woke up determined. I walked straight to Miss April's office and said, "Teach me how to fight back." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I said, "Not with fists, with my voice. I want to tell my story everywhere. I want people to know the truth. So no girl ever feels like I did, trapped, scared, and alone." She smiled. That was the beginning of something new. But just when I was beginning to feel in control of my life again, something terrible happened at school. Something that brought me to my knees all over again. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I had just finished giving a short speech during school assembly. The principal had asked me to talk about courage. I stood in front of over 500 students, clutching the microphone with shaky hands. I told them, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep standing even when your legs feel like jelly. Some of the students cheered. A few clapped. I even saw one teacher wipe her eyes. I felt proud, lighter, like I was finally becoming more than what they did to me. But that feeling didn't last. As I was walking back to class, a boy from the senior section stepped into my path. His name was Brian, tall with a twisted smile. He was known for teasing girls and causing trouble. I didn't like him, but I never imagined he'd say what he did. He blocked me, looked straight into my eyes, and said loudly, "So you're the famous tied-up girl? How much did your uncle pay you to lie on him?" I froze. It was like someone had slapped me across the face. A few students nearby gasped. Some laughed nervously. One girl covered her mouth in shock. My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, to scream, to cry, but no words came out. Then he leaned closer and whispered, "People like you don't deserve a stage. You just want pity." That's when I snapped. I shoved him. Hard. He stumbled back, shocked. The teachers rushed out. Students started shouting. The vice principal grabbed my arm and pulled me aside while Brian rubbed his chest and smirked. They took me to the office and made me sit alone. A few minutes later, my mother was called. When she arrived, she looked tired but calm. After hearing what happened, she turned to the vice principal and said something I'll never forget. "My daughter survived 12 days of torture. You think one insult from a rude boy will break her?" The room went quiet. Brian's parents were called too. They came in angry, demanding I be suspended. But for the first time in a long time, someone stood up for me. My class teacher, Miss Diane, stood and said, "Enough is enough. If anyone deserves protection, it's her. This girl is a survivor, not a liar." Eventually, the school gave Brian 2 weeks of suspension and sent me home for the day. I didn't feel like a winner, though. I cried the whole ride home. Not because of what Brian said, but because deep inside, a part of me still wondered, would people ever see me for who I am now, and not just what I went through. At home, Miss April came by. I told her everything. I told her I wanted to disappear. That maybe if I had stayed quiet, all this wouldn't be happening. She knelt beside me and held my hands. "No. Don't ever say that. If you stay quiet, then they win. You didn't ask for this pain, but you chose to speak. That's strength." That night, I opened my notebook and wrote 4 pages straight. I poured every emotion into it. And then something inside me changed. I decided I would turn my pain into purpose. The next week, I joined the school press club. I wrote an article titled, "The Girl Who Survived." I didn't use my name. I didn't mention Uncle Daniel or Jerry directly, but I told the story. Word got around. Some teachers cried. Other students came up to me and said things like, "You're so brave," or "Thank you for speaking up." Even students who used to whisper behind my back began saying hello. Then came the next twist. A week later, while I was walking home with 2 girls from class, a man stepped out of an alley. He wore a hat low over his eyes and had a long coat on. I didn't recognize him at first, until he spoke. "You're making a lot of noise for a little girl," he said coldly. "Your uncle doesn't like that." I froze. My friends screamed. The man turned and walked away fast before anyone else saw him. We ran home, breathless and terrified. My mother called the police again. This time they didn't just write a report. They assigned an officer to watch our street. But that encounter proved one thing. Uncle Daniel hadn't let go. He was still lurking, still sending threats, still trying to silence me. And just as I started to rebuild myself, something worse happened. We woke up the next morning to the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a rock through our window. Attached to it was another note. It read, "Stop talking or next time it won't be a rock." My mother sank to the floor in tears.
I stod over her, fists clenched.
Enough was enough. I decided I wouldn't just wait for the police to help. I was going to fight. But not with weapons. With proof. With people. With my voice. And so, I made a bold move. I contacted a radio station and asked to tell my story, live. The radio station was called Voice of the People FM. It wasn't very big, but it was known for real stories, real voices. Miss April helped me draft a message. She told them I was a young girl with a story that needed to be heard. At first, they didn't believe it. But after she sent them a copy of my article, The Girl Who Survived, they replied within 2 days. They invited me for a Saturday morning segment titled Voices of Courage. The host's name was Mr. Raymond. When I walked into the studio that morning with my mother and Miss April beside me, I was scared. My hands were cold, my mouth dry, but I knew this was something I had to do. Mr. Raymond was warm and gentle. He offered me water and smiled. "Take your time," he said. "Speak from your heart. That's all we ask." And I did. For the next 30 minutes, I told everything. The 12 days. The ropes. The hunger. The beatings. My escape. The threats. The pain. The healing. I spoke with trembling lips, but I never stopped. I let the world hear the truth. Not as a victim but as a fighter. By the time I finished, there were tears in Mr. Raymond's eyes. My mother held my hand so tightly. Miss April just nodded like she had always known I had this fire inside me. After the show ended, I thought it would be forgotten like everything else. But I was wrong. The radio episode went viral. Within hours, the clip was shared on social media. People began calling me the Little Lioness. Newspapers picked up the story. Schools began inviting me to speak. Other girls, some younger, some older, sent letters saying, "You gave me the courage to speak too." It felt like my voice had finally broken the chains I had been locked in. But evil never sleeps. That very night, we came home to find the front door of our house wide open. Inside, the place was a mess. Chairs overturned. Curtains torn. Plates smashed on the floor. My notebooks, including the one Miss April gave me, had been ripped to pieces and scattered across my bed. And written on the wall in red spray paint were 3 words. "We warned you." My mother fell to her knees and screamed. I just stood there, frozen. I had thought telling my story would end the nightmare. I thought shining light would chase away the darkness. But it only made the shadows angrier. The police arrived. They took pictures. They made promises. But I could see it in their eyes. They were afraid too. Uncle Daniel and Jerry weren't just 2 criminals now. They were predators in hiding. Dangerous. Desperate. That night, I couldn't sleep in my room. I curled up beside my mother. Miss April stayed over too. The windows were locked. The lights left on. But I still saw shadows in every corner. In the morning, Miss April made a decision. "You're not safe here," she said. "You're coming with me for a while." I didn't argue. She took me to her home. Quiet, warm, surrounded by trees. She had a guest room with a soft bed and sky blue curtains. It felt like a new world. Safe. Peaceful. At least for a few days. One evening, as we sat outside sipping hot cocoa, Miss April asked me something strange. "Have you ever thought about confronting them?" I frowned. Confront them? I don't even know where they are. She looked at me carefully. "But what if you did? What if you had a chance to look them in the eye again and say everything you ever wanted to say?" My heart pounded at the thought. I'd be scared. "That's okay," she said. "Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about showing up anyway." Later that week, something happened that brought me one step closer to that moment. A call came through to the radio station. A man called himself Michael. He said he had seen Jerry a few nights ago, drunk, stumbling near a bus stop in a nearby town called Riverside. He said Jerry bragged to some boys that the girl was still scared of him, that she would never dare face him again. Mr. Raymond informed us immediately. The police were notified. And for the first time in months, we had a real lead. Plans were made. A small team of officers were sent to Riverside. I stayed behind, shaking every time the phone rang. They searched for 3 days, asking people, checking hideouts, going through bars and unfinished buildings. Then on the 4th day, we got the call. They had found Jerry, hiding in an abandoned warehouse near the railway line. They arrested him. And now he was going to face trial. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. I just sat there shaking. The boy who had tied me, beaten me, mocked me, he was finally in custody. But there was one problem. Uncle Daniel was still missing. And Jerry refused to talk. Until the day of the trial, when he sat in court, looked me in the eye for the first time in months, and said 7 words that shook the room. I wasn't the one in charge. Those 7 words hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't the one in charge. Everyone in the courtroom turned their heads to look at Jerry. The judge leaned forward. The prosecutor froze with her mouth open. My mother clutched my hand tighter. Miss April whispered under her breath, "It's starting." The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Jerry, can you explain what you mean?" Jerry shifted in his chair, his face pale. He looked nothing like the arrogant boy who once dragged me across the floor. The room was silent, holding its breath. "It was my dad," he muttered. "He told me what to do. He planned it all." Gasps echoed around the courtroom. The judge raised his hand to silence the murmurs. Do you mean to say, the prosecutor asked carefully, that your father, Daniel Wade, ordered you to assault, restrain, and abuse your cousin? Jerry nodded. He said she needed to be taught a lesson. That she was too stubborn, too full of herself. He made me help him tie her, made me guard her, made me watch her cry. And when I refused one night, he beat me too. I felt sick. Even after everything, hearing it out loud broke something in me again. My mouth went dry. My legs felt weak. But I couldn't look away. I needed to hear this. Jerry continued, voice trembling now. I wanted to stop. I swear. But he said if I told anyone, he'd kill me. Said no one would believe me anyway. My eyes filled with tears, not out of pity, but because the truth was finally being told. Out loud. In front of everyone. The judge ordered an immediate search for Uncle Daniel. Jerry was taken back into custody, and the court recessed for the day. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. I kept my head low, but they still shouted questions. Is it true your uncle is still missing? Do you feel safe now? Do you want revenge? But I didn't answer any of them. Because at that moment, something deeper was happening inside me. I wasn't just a girl who survived anymore. I was now a girl who had power. People believed me. The world was listening. Later that night, as we sat in Miss April's living room, my mother staring into her teacup, the TV announced breaking news. Nationwide manhunt launched for Daniel Wade, accused of child abuse, illegal imprisonment, and physical assault. Anyone with information is urged to contact the authorities. I watched the screen, my hands trembling slightly. Then Miss April turned to me and said, "You're getting stronger every day. Do you feel it?" I nodded. But then the phone rang. Miss April answered. Her face changed. She glanced at me, then spoke quietly into the phone. When she hung up, she turned to us and said, "They found someone. A man matching Daniel Wade's description." My stomach dropped. "Where?" my mother asked. "An old train station in a different state. He was caught trying to board a cargo train under a fake name. But he ran before they could arrest him. They lost him in the woods." The room fell silent. "He's on the run," I whispered. Miss April nodded slowly. But not forever. For the next few days, everything became quiet again. Jerry remained in prison, waiting for the next hearing. I returned to school, but now with a school counselor guiding me through my classes. Some kids still stared. Others avoided me. But there were a few, kind faces, who sat with me at lunch or helped me carry my books. I started writing more. I filled 3 more notebooks. One poem I wrote got published in the school magazine. It was called 12 Days of Silence. The final line read, "They thought they buried me, but I was a seed." Then one morning, we received an envelope. No name, no stamp, just slid under the door. Inside was a photo. It was of my school, taken from a distance. And behind it, scrawled in thick red pen, were the words, "I know where you are." I dropped the photo and screamed. Miss April rushed to the door and locked it. My mother called the police. Again, they sent officers to guard the house. But we all knew, Uncle Daniel was back. And now he wasn't just hiding. He was hunting. Something had to change. That evening, I looked at my mother and said, "I'm tired of running. Let me testify. Let me face him. If they catch him, I don't care anymore." She cried. But she agreed. I was done living in fear. If they wouldn't find him, I would make him come to me. And so, I planned something bold. Something dangerous. Something that could finally bring him out of the shadows. But before I could begin, he struck again. This time not at me, but at someone I love. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was just finishing my toast when the phone rang. Miss April answered, smiling at first, but her expression changed quickly. Her hands began to shake. She turned to me, her voice thin and breaking. "It's your mother," she whispered. "She's been attacked." The cup in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. My heart stopped. We rushed to the hospital. I don't remember how we got there. I just remember running through white hallways, the smell of medicine in the air, and the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. When we reached the emergency room, I saw her. My mother. Lying on a hospital bed, bandages wrapped around her forehead and arm, a drip connected to her hand, her face bruised and swollen. I ran to her. Mommy! Mommy! Her eyes fluttered open, and she gave me a weak smile. I'm okay, baby.
I'm okay.
But she wasn't. The doctor pulled Miss April aside. She was found unconscious in her shop, he said. Looks like someone broke in and struck her from behind. She could have died if the neighbor hadn't found her early. I turned to the window, fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I knew who did this. Uncle Daniel. He couldn't reach me. So he went after the only person I loved more than myself. Later that evening, the police arrived. They had found a note left on the wall of my mother's shop, just like before. This one said, "If you speak again, next time I'll finish it." Miss April put her arm around me, but I pulled away. I want to end this, I said. Not like this, she replied gently. He's dangerous. I don't care anymore. I sat at my mother's bedside all night, watching her chest rise and fall. Her soft breathing reminded me of all the nights she stayed awake by my bed, guarding me after my escape. Now it was my turn. The next morning, something in me shifted. I went online and posted a video. I looked straight into the camera and said, "My name is Rachel Wade. I'm 12 years old, and I was tied, beaten, and locked away by my own uncle and his son. But I didn't die. I survived. I escaped, and I will not stay silent. If something happens to me or my mother again, this video will tell the truth to the world." The video spread fast. People began sharing it. Newspapers picked it up. Human rights groups started calling. The pressure was on. The police began setting traps. They released his photo again. Announced a bounty. Every radio station and TV station showed Uncle Daniel's face. He was running out of places to hide. And then came the break we had been waiting for. A woman from a small village near the border of another state called in. She had seen a man matching Daniel's description hiding in a local church compound, pretending to be a traveling preacher. The police acted immediately. They surrounded the area the next day. A short chase happened. And finally, they caught him. Uncle Daniel, my monster, was in handcuffs. He screamed. He spat. He swore I was lying. He said I was possessed, that I was sent to destroy him. But no one believed him anymore. I watched him on the TV screen as they dragged him into the police van. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I turned to Miss April and said, "It's over." But she looked at me and said gently, "Not yet, Rachel. The trial is just beginning." And she was right. The court case began 2 weeks later. It was the biggest thing to happen in our town in years. Reporters filled the courtroom. Lawyers sharpened their questions like knives. And me? I stood strong. I sat in the witness box and told my story. Again. This time I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I didn't hide my face. Uncle Daniel wouldn't even look at me. Jerry was brought in too in chains. He wouldn't speak anymore. He just stared at the floor. One by one people testified. My teachers. My doctor. Miss April. Even the neighbor who found my mother after the attack. Each voice added another nail to their coffin. And then came the final day of court. The judge looked at both of them, his voice heavy with judgment. And he said, I stared at the lock. My heart raced. Could it be real? Was this the moment I had prayed for? I twisted the handle. It opened. The door actually opened. For a moment, I stood frozen, blinking into the hallway as if it were a dream. I half expected someone to grab me from behind, or the door to slam shut again. But no. The hallway was empty, dark, and quiet. I peeked out. The coast was clear. I was free. But I couldn't just run. I didn't even know where I was. And I was so weak. My legs trembled as I crept down the hallway. Every floorboard creaked, sounding like thunder. I didn't know if Uncle Johnny or Chris were around. Maybe they were asleep. Maybe they were out. Maybe this was a trick. I tiptoed past the living room. The door to the outside was in sight. My breath hitched. I placed my hand on the knob. Then I heard a car engine. I panicked and dove behind the couch. Peeking through the curtain, I saw the headlights flash across the wall as the car pulled into the compound. I couldn't see who it was, but I knew that sound. It was Chris's car. I had missed my window. Tears welled up in my eyes. My body trembled from fear and frustration. I had been so close. So close. I quickly crawled back to the hallway, gently closing the door to the room as quietly as I could. I stood in the darkness, breathing heavily, trying to think. Then something moved behind me. Before I could turn fully, a large hand grabbed my neck and shoved me against the wall. "Going somewhere, Grandma?" Chris growled. I gasped for air, trying to scream, but nothing came out. "Thought you could escape, he spat. "You really think you can outsmart us?" He dragged me back into the room, but this time he didn't tie me up. Instead, he threw me down hard onto the cold floor and locked the door again from the outside. "You'll stay in there till your bones rot," he shouted. "Try escaping again. I'll make sure you leave here in a casket." I lay there shaking, coughing, my body aching in every place. But something had changed inside me. I had seen the door open. I had touched freedom. That spark of hope lit something deep within my soul. They could beat me. They could lock me up. But I now knew the way out. I had almost made it. And next time, I would. The next morning I woke up to shouting outside. It wasn't just Chris and Uncle Johnny's voices. It was more. A woman screamed, "You wicked people! What have you done to her?" Another voice shouted, "Break the door! Break it now!" Then, bang! The door burst open, and what I saw standing there changed everything. The door flew open with a loud crack. There stood a woman I hadn't seen in years, my elder sister, Clara. Behind her were 2 police officers, a crowd of neighbors, and a few young boys holding long sticks and machetes. Clara's eyes widened when she saw me lying on the floor, my body bruised and thin like a ghost. She dropped to her knees and screamed, "Oh my God! Grandma Betty! What have they done to you?" Tears spilled down her face as she held me gently. I couldn't even lift my arms to hug her back. All I could do was whisper, "You came." "Yes, I came. I came because your call stopped. I knew something was wrong. I asked around. Nobody had seen you. I tracked you down. I begged the police to follow me here," she said, her voice breaking. The officers stormed into the hallway. One shouted, "Where are they? Where's Johnny and his son?" The neighbors pointed. They jumped the back fence when they saw the crowd coming. Cowards. But the boys with the machetes were already running after them. Within minutes, Chris and Uncle Johnny were dragged back into the house, dirty, sweating, and begging. "Please. It was a misunderstanding. She's old. She forgets things." But the crowd was not buying their lies. The officers immediately cuffed them. One officer said, "We're taking both of you in. Kidnapping, assault, attempted murder. You're finished." As they were dragged away, Chris locked eyes with me. "You'll regret this," he hissed. But for the first time I didn't feel afraid. I was surrounded by people who cared. I was no longer alone. Clara helped me sit up. "You're going to the hospital. You need food, rest, healing." I looked at her with tears in my eyes. "How did you know where to find me?" She smiled faintly. "I followed my heart. And your spirit kept whispering to me." Just then, the crowd parted as a neighbor's wife brought a bowl of hot porridge. "Let her eat something warm," she said. I wept. 12 days of pain. 12 days of silence. But now, light was breaking through the darkness. Still, something deep inside told me the story wasn't over yet. Because Uncle Johnny's secrets ran deeper than any of us had guessed. And what the police found next left the whole town in shock. The next morning, as I lay on the hospital bed with an IV drip in my arm and warm blankets covering my frail body, Clara sat by my side, holding my hand. We hadn't spoken much since the rescue. I was still too weak. But my mind was spinning with questions. Why had my uncle done this to me? What had changed him into such a monster? Then Clara's phone rang. It was the police. Her eyes narrowed as she listened. She hung up and turned to me slowly. "Betty, they found something in the house. Something terrible." I whispered. "What did they find?" Clara hesitated. "You remember that small locked room at the end of the hallway?" I nodded weakly. "They broke it open. Inside, they found hidden cameras, old notebooks, and her voice broke. Videos of other women, young girls, old women, even children. I gasped. What are you saying? Uncle Johnny has been doing this for years. You weren't the first, Betty. You were just the one strong enough to survive. My chest tightened. Tears streamed down my cheeks again. Why? Why would he do this? Clara shook her head. I don't know, but the police think he's part of something bigger, maybe a trafficking ring. That's why he kept you hidden. Maybe you were next. The room fell silent. A nurse walked in, checked my vitals, and softly whispered, "You're lucky to be alive, ma'am." But I didn't feel lucky. I felt broken. I had survived 12 days of horror. But now I was left to carry the weight of truth, that my own blood had planned something even darker for me. A few hours later, a female officer visited me in the hospital. "We're building a strong case," she said gently, "but we need your testimony. You're the only one who made it out alive." I looked at her, my voice raspy. "I will testify. Not just for me, but for every girl he ever hurt. And for those who didn't make it out." That night, I closed my eyes with Clara by my side. I wasn't just a survivor. I was the beginning of justice. Because sometimes strength doesn't come from the body. It comes from refusing to stay silent.